How is it going, everybody? Hope everyone is well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. It may not look like a CFL talk show right now because I'm wearing my Buffalo Bills jersey. But anyway, in this video, we're going to talk about the biggest question facing every CFL team this offseason. And this could just range from just something very specific as bringing back a certain player or just some greater organizational challenges that they're going to have to navigate this year. So I'm really excited to get into it and talk about all this off-season content with you guys the next coming weeks and months here. But really quickly, before we get into it, if you want to support the show, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate all the support, guys. And with that said, let's get on with the video. So today for the list, we're not going to go in any specific order with the teams. Just kind of randomized the whole thing as I thought the questions through. So we're going to start with the Edmonton Elks. And obviously hiring Chris Jones as the head coach and general manager, the dual role the other day. And just huge news, obviously, being that he won a Grey Cup there before and then obviously controversially left for Saskatchewan. And I mean, he's a very interesting guy around the league, and I'm really interested to see how this pans out. But the question I have for them is, with Chris Jones being around the league so much, he has a lot of connections, what factor does he play in free agency? Is he going to be a good recruiter? Because that's the thing about the CFL. You can turn around an entire team in one offseason, given how much turnover there is. And if he can recruit a whole bunch of guys that he's had relationships with around the league, it could be huge to the Elks' success next season. Now for the Montreal Alouettes, I have more of a simple question here is, can they retain their star wide receiver, Jake Winnipeg, who's bound to have a big market in this free agency class? A lot of receivers obviously available, a lot of players available in this year's free agency class, but there's basically none that are as proven this year as Jake Winnipeg was. Just a dominant player all around this year, especially in the red zone where he uses that big frame very effectively. And he was just such a key cog in this Montreal Alouettes offense that finished first in a lot of scoring categories this year in the CFL. And I think if they retain Wine, pretty good shape. I think if they can just retain a lot of their roster, guys like Amondo Sewell, their leaders around on the defensive side that really improved this season, and they can, continue with this offense with Vernon Adams hopefully being healthy for a full season next year, that would make a big difference for this Alouettes team going into next year. And I think they would have a very good shot at competing for the East next season if they were able to retain Winnipeg this offseason. Now for the BC Lions, I have a very simple question as well, and that's will Michael Riley retire this offseason? And this really is going to be big for sorting out the quarterback market, I think, because it's possible that if Riley says, I'm going to play, then there's negotiations about, I think they want to bring down his contract because he's under contract for next year. And the questions are going to be if the BC Lions can come to an agreement with him on that, or would they look elsewhere? And there's plenty of other options that are going to be on the market, such as the two Hamilton guys we'll talk about in a second. But, this is just a huge decision this offseason. Obviously, it's Michael Riley's decision to make. He's 37, and I think a lot of people say, oh, he's past his prime. And sure, he's not as good as he was in 2015 when he was, like 2017, I believe, when he was the MOP of the league. But, I mean, he doesn't have as good of a surrounding core as he had with the Edmonton Elks or Edmonton Eskimos a few years back. So, I mean, I think Mike Riley actually has a lot of football left in him. And I think he's still, in my opinion, still a top 3 quarterback in this league. But, I mean, I think the surrounding circumstances have really hurt his performance over the last few years. He's taken a lot of hits. And I'm really curious to see what he does this offseason if he continues to play. Could he end up elsewhere, or something like Hamilton, or like a team that decides that they want to change their quarterback situation? So really curious to see what Mike Riley does this offseason, just for himself and for the BC Lions, because it's going to be such a huge decision for this organization. Now for the Hamilton TigerCats, and this is the big question, probably the most obvious one on this list, and is what are they going to do with these two quarterbacks that they have as free agents this offseason? And I mean, I'm not even completely ruling it out that they let both of them go and they try to, look for an outside option. Mike Riley, as I just mentioned, but I'm not too sure what they're going to do like, if I were them, I would try really hard to re-sign Dane Evans because he's significantly younger. I mean, you really know what Jeremiah Masoli is at this point. He is a good quarterback, he can win you some games, and some team is going to give him a starting job next year. I have no doubt about it. But with Dane Evans, I think, he's shown a lot of promise in such a short stint as a starter. I think he is something like 12-3 or something like that. That's like his career record as a starting quarterback. Obviously, a couple like bad performances in the Grey Cup, but I think Dane Evans is incredibly promising, and he was the reason why they were in the Grey Cup this year with the way they played in the conference final against Toronto. So, I mean, I'm really interested to see where these quarterbacks end up, if they choose one or the other, or do they let both walk? Or I really doubt that they'll bring both back just because of the demands that both guys will command salary wise. So it's going to be really curious to see how that sorts its way out in Hamilton. Now for Saskatchewan, and this is more of an outside of the box kind of question here for this offseason, but I think it's could be really crucial to deciding how this team performs going forward in their evaluation of Cody Fajardo going forward, and that's improving this offensive line. The question I have is, does Brandon Labatt, their star offensive lineman from 2019 and years before, who opted out of the 2021 season, does he decide to play in 2022? Because when he's in there, he's like honestly one of the best offensive linemen in the league. I mean, he can play a little tackle, he can play a little center, play a little guard. I mean, he's just a very versatile offensive lineman, and he's also made multiple all-star teams in this league, but I think he also won a Most Outstanding Offensive Lineman award a few years back as well. So, I mean, he's a remarkable player, but does he decide to come out of retirement? Not a retirement, but necessarily, but does he decide to play next year? That is a big question for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and he would also help with the ratio situation. He's a very talented Canadian player as well. So, I mean, I'm really interested to see because, I think they really need to improve that running game. This year, I think they really took a step back in terms of their offensive line play and the way that they commanded the line of scrimmage. In 2019, they were one of the best teams at it, and I think Labatt was a huge part of that. And I think this is part of the evaluation process for Cody Fajardo. You got to give him a little bit more better surrounding pieces along the offensive line. I think the perimeter guys are pretty good, but it's all about getting him the time and making sure he's not running for his life back there, and give him a solid running game that really allows him to thrive off those play-action passes. Now for the Toronto Argonauts, there's a lot of questions you could pose about this team this offseason. Obviously had a very successful season this year in the regular season, and then obviously it kind of fell apart in the second half of their playoff game. Ultimately, I think the bigger question here is how many of these veteran players that they bring back this offseason. I mean, I think they did a really good in free agency last year, and that's how they made such a big improvement. They brought in guys like Haynock Muamba, Devaris Daniels, and all these other pieces as well. Ricky Collins Jr. played a big role for them. All these big splashes they made in free agency last year. How many of these guys are they able to retain? I think their defense was a huge part of their success last year. Guys like Dexter McCoyle and Chris Edwards at strong side linebacker played really well this year for them and were a huge part of their success. How many of those guys come back? So it's just a general roster question. I think they will give McLeod Bethel-Thompson another year at quarterback, but it's always possible that they pull the rug out from underneath us and try to seek out another option like I said these other teams in the league might do this offseason. Now for Calgary, and this is a relatively simple question here for me, and that is, can they retain their very promising looking backup quarterback Jake Maier, who really impressed in those 3 starts in relief of Bo Levi Mitchell this year with his injury. So Maier, I believe, threw for 300 yards in all 3 of those starts. I mean, I'm not a big passing yardage guys, but that is pretty impressive considering that wasn't done that much in the league this year. And I think that, it's going to be really interesting to see if he has a market and if he leaves Calgary. Some team, maybe Ottawa, Edmonton maybe, gives him a look as an opportunity to compete for a starting job next year. And obviously with Calgary, I don't think they're going to move on from Bo. It's possible, I guess, but I don't think that they're going to be pulling the plug on Bo Levi Mitchell after that one really poor season. Obviously, 2019, not the greatest year for him either because he struggled with injuries. But, I think it's really important for that reason as well that they retain Mayer this offseason because he's got to be injury assurance for Bo, who's looking increasingly injury prone as the years go on. So, really curious to see where Mayer ends up this offseason, and it's going to be a big priority, I think, for Calgary to try to seal up that backup position this offseason. For the Ottawa Redblacks, and this is a team that has just a laundry list of questions going into next year. I mean, think about the quarterback position. There's just a lot of names in there because they had so many quarterback injuries with Nichols, Dominic Davis, Caleb Evans played a lot of the season. Duck Hodges came in and even started a game. So it's really interesting to see what they sort out with the quarterback position. But I think regardless of who they start at quarterback, they're not going to be able to have success until they can fix this just disaster of an offensive line that was this season. I mean, really the stat to illustrate this was, I believe it was the first 12 games of the season, they started 12 different starting line combinations, and that's just not a recipe for success. That really shows you that they're trying to fix problems, but they just are not having success at it every week. They're having injuries. Also had a few guys that retired before the season, Alex Mateus and Alex Montana, two guys that were going to be really key to their interior offensive line. But this was a team that struggled already on the offensive line in 2019, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they try to patch that up this offseason because I think it's going to be really crucial to this team having success. And then finally, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, just more of a specific player question here, and that is, will Andrew Harris be back with the team? Obviously, a legendary running back, had a great career. He's 35 years old now, I believe. I mean, it's ancient for a running back, but I mean, even in the playoffs, he showed that he could just go from 0 to 60 and just like that, right? So he is still a really good player, but I'm really interested to see from Winnipeg's organizational perspective, will they bring him back this offseason? They have all of these young Canadian running backs that have shown they can play when Andrew Harris was injured this season. And even though I don't think they're as good as Andrew Harris still today, they all obviously would probably be a little bit cheaper for this Winnipeg team to afford. Brady Oliveira, Johnny Augustine both showed a lot of promise for this team in the backfield. So I'm really interested to see if they decide to move on from Andrew Harris. It's quite possible. Could be a lot of veterans saying goodbye to the teams that have been there for a long time. I think guys like maybe Brandon Banks does not come back with the TigerCats young receivers that are there as well. So I think Andrew Harris, it's going to be interesting to see if he's back with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers given their unique situation and Andrew Harris's age. He may just retire coming off back-to-back Grey Cup wins, but yeah, curious to see if he's back with the Bombers next season. And with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. Be sure to let me know in the comments section what is the biggest question facing your favorite CFL team this offseason. I'd love to hear it. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.